Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Today's topic on rewiring the brain is very dear to me as I have been working on this and similar areas for nearly 20 years. So thanks for joining me today in yet another session on health and wellness. In today's session, we will discuss the following aspects. What is brain rewiring or neuroplasticity? What are the tools to boost your physical, mental, and emotional immunity through brain rewiring? And what are the advantages of rewiring the brain? Now, remember, brain rewiring, also known as neuroplasticity, refers to the brain's amazing ability to create or sprout new neuronal branches, or to modify the existing neuronal connections and literally rewire itself. When neuronal cells, in the case of brain, the neuronal cells do not regenerate as well as, let's say, the liver cells or the skin cells. But neurons have this amazing capacity to mold or rewire itself into new branches. And in some cases, they even produce long neuronal extensions to nearby tissues. This active sprouting in the brain is termed as neuroplasticity, and it refers to the brain's capacity to mold and rewire itself. If you look at the cartoon here, on the left side of the axis of the cartoon, you see the two distinct branches of the neurons. All right, they're not interconnected. Whereas on the right side, because of the learning capacity or the things that the person has done to strengthen the brain, the neurons have merged or they're connected with each other. So this active growth in the neuronal branching is especially seen during stimulating and challenging learning. So stimulating and challenging learning comes from brain training, mental training, and mental exercise, which all mean the same thing. Now, since the mind is very subtle and is not easily comprehensible, when we talk about mental exercise or mental training, please remember that I'm referring to the brain structure and function. Now, mental training or brain training or rewiring helps an individual to become more alert, to become more sensible, to become more rational. The reason being that these exercises or training stimulate new neuronal connections. Now, just as you do not use a muscle or any part of the body, which then tends to become more atrophic or which tends to degenerate or rigid, all right? In the same case with the brain, the more you use the brain, the better is the capacity of the brain cells to mold themselves, to rewire themselves, and to form new connections. Now, research studies from our lab and from other groups have shown that humans actually build and rebuild these neuronal connections throughout their lives. So it means that having a daily training schedule helps to maintain, build, and remodel the neuronal connections. In addition, what happens is brain training will trigger the production of nerve growth factors. These nerve growth factors actually promote or stimulate new neuronal connections. And this activity then strengthens the neural pathways and it strengthens the brain in that process. So keeping the brain agile through a daily brain training exercise will prevent age-associated memory losses and cognitive decline. It also helps to overcome brain fog, which I talked about last month. And because of this mind-body nexus, it's not surprising to note that those who possess a higher level of mental agility, they tend to be physically healthy and they live a high-quality, harmonious life. Now, envision neuroplasticity or brain rewiring that is as a process that's very similar to a walk trail in the forest. Now, if you have ever taken a walk in the woods, you would have probably noticed that frequent use of the walk trail makes it broader and more wider. And over time, these walking trails appear more and more obvious as they become well established. In the same way, our brains are constantly changing, sculpting, and rewiring itself. If you look at the cartoon here that I've shown, and notice that there's a thick forest of neuronal branching. And this happens in response to new learning. It happens in response to new experiences. And as these new neuronal branches become stronger, they become well established, they become permanent. So the thicker the forest of neuronal connections, the stronger and the more resilient the brain is, and greater is the mental immunity. So the question is, what are the various methods by which you can rewire the brain, or what are the methods by which you can develop new neuronal branches? So you can do so. You can do so through specific brain strengthening exercises that includes, among others, solving complex equations and puzzles, reading, visual spatial learning, exposing yourself to new experiences, memorizing passages and texts, and recalling correctly whatever you have memorized. Now, notice people often complain about an inability to learn new things and retrieve information. They also experience challenges with the latest technological aids as they age. They'll also perform very poorly on complex tasks of attention, learning, and memory. That is because the areas of the brain, namely the cortex and the hippocampus, these are the areas that are involved in learning, memory acquisition, recall, planning, cognitive behavior, personality, social behavior, and decision making. So these areas, they lose their ability or they lose their agility with each passing year. Now, research studies from our group and from other laboratories have clearly shown that brain training exercises help prevent the deterioration of these brain areas and help to improve attention, learning, and memory. This in turn delays the onset of neurodegenerative diseases. So let us look at specific aspects of brain training exercises to stimulate brain rewiring. Now remember, when we do these exercises, we are strengthening three aspects of brain function: memory acquisition, memory consolidation, and memory recall. Okay, so these training exercises that I'm going to list out in the next few slides will help in memory acquisition, memory consolidation, and recall. And these exercises are generally grouped into four main categories. The first categories are those exercises to strengthen the memory. Okay, during intense learning, neurons from different areas of the brain, they tend to sprout new branches that wire with each other, that wire up with one another, and they communicate to thousands of such connections. As a result, memory gets consolidated and becomes more permanent, and it becomes easy to recall. So the following activities will actually strengthen your memory by boosting the level of brain chemicals as well that are responsible for memory storage, consolidation, and retrieval. So reading. Now, when we talk about reading, please remember, it's just not about reading a passage and forgetting about it. It's about analyzing what you have read, reasoning it out, and then putting your brain to task by actually thinking about how you can apply that reading passage in a practical way, that is application. And this, my friends, is very similar to the Vedantic concepts of Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. All right. So in addition to reading, learning by rote, in India, we use the term by heart, which actually means to internalize. All right. And we are habituated to that. For example, when we start off our school, we start out by memorizing all the tables, right? So if I were to give you a number 12 times 11, you should be able to say 132 immediately. Or if I say 9 times 13, you should be able to say 117 immediately without resorting to the calculator. That's because we have learned all this by rote, all right? But we have internalized it. So learning by rote is a very good way of strengthening the brain. Reverse counting from 100 to 0. It may seem very simple, but for people who are having initial memory lapses, it becomes very difficult to correctly recall the numbers, especially as you come down from 90 to 10. All right. In addition, memorizing the lyrics of a new song, learning a new musical instrument, memorizing the street signs in your area, in your neighborhood, learning a new language, completing a crossword puzzle, math puzzle, word building, Sudoku. All these are extremely helpful in strengthening the brain. All right. Now, when it comes to the role of memory in the neuroplastic response or the neuroplasticity response, there is one specific study titled The Sanskrit Effect. You can Google that and look for yourself. So a neuroscientist actually set out to understand, okay, what exactly happens on the neuronal rewiring following learning. So what it was, this was 100 subject study involving young pundits or young boys who are reciting the Veda mantras for several hours in a row in the Shukla Yajurveda tradition. These pundits were actually hooked up to various electrodes to several different MRI machines that continually scanned different areas of the brain as they chanted the Vedic mantras. All right. And then what the researchers did is they compared the MRI scans of the brains of these pundits to control brains. And then what they showed is that memorizing and daily recitation of these Veda mantras actually increased the several brain regions associated with cognitive function. Learning by rote, recalling, and reciting the mantras enhances both the memory and thinking aspects of the brain. Numerous areas of the brain of these pundits were dramatically larger compared to the control subjects, with nearly 20% increase in the growth owing to new neuronal connections across both cerebral hemispheres. Now, more interestingly was the fact that the right hemispheres of these pundits' brains, this is the region of the brain that actually plays a vital role in both short-term and long-term memory. So the area of the right hippocampus had significant increase in the volume and density, suggesting that there were new branches and new connections. In addition, these pundits also showed substantially significant thickening of the cortical regions in the temporal areas of the brain. These are the areas of the brain that are involved with speech and voice identity. So memorizing and continuous recitation of verses and hymns is a complex task for the brain, and the brain then responds by forming new neuronal connections and modifying existing branches to make these neuronal connections more stronger and more permanent. All right. Now, just because I said it's a Sanskrit effect, it doesn't mean that this increase in the density of the hemispheres of the brain occurs only when you do Sanskrit recitation. It's not just about the language, Sanskrit. It's about, in general, any kind of passage, any kind of reading analysis, any kind of recitation that involves continuous learning, that puts the brain to task will be helpful. All right. Now, the second tool that is necessary for brain rewiring is attention. Now, please remember, memories cannot be sustained without the power of attention. And attention is necessary to consolidate memories, to maintain focus, to maintain concentration in a given task, and to complete these tasks in a timely manner. Now, notice our power of choice actually affects our attention profoundly, since all those that receive the greatest attention from us will remain in our memories for a very long time, whereas all those things that we pay very little attention to will be forgotten. For example, we tend to forget what we had for breakfast 3 days ago compared to the movie scenes of a movie that we saw a week ago, right? So attention is very important. And one way to improve attention is in the brain and promote brain rewiring is by simply changing your daily routines or your daily habits. So what happens is by changing your daily routines and by changing your daily habits, you are actually forcing the brain to become more active and to create new neural connections and new neural networks. So for example, if you're typically driving the same road or the same path to work, all right, try taking a new path, a totally new different route to a workplace without the use of GPS, without the use of maps. And then after you reach your destination, try to recall the names of all the streets that you used. In a similar way, if you have a habit of taking a daily walk in your neighborhood, try taking a new road or try taking a new approach and check the various street signs and try to memorize them. And it's just not about memorizing these street signs. Can you actually recall all this new information maybe 30 minutes after the experience, or 1 hour after the experience, or 6 hours after the experience? Because remember, recalling correctly requires 100% attention. All right. Now, here I'd like to give another example called the London CAP study. And this is one perfect example of the brain's neuroplastic response to attention and memory. Now, London taxi drivers undergo 4 to 5 years of exhaustive training in which they have to memorize all of London's streets, secondary roads, bylanes, and alleys. Then these drivers in training appear for a unique intellectual, psychological, and physical exam that is considered to be one of the hardest taxi tests of any kind in the world. All right. Now, this is before the advent of GPS and before the advent of Uber and other car driving mechanisms. Okay. So what happens is these taxi drivers that drove the taxi, once they appear for the exam, and then once they pass the exam, only then were they allowed, or only then were they given the license to operate their taxis in the streets of London. Now, in contrast to bus drivers whose driving routes are well established and unchanging. Remember, the bus drivers cannot take a different route. They have to follow the same route because that's where the people or the passengers are going to wait for them. In contrast to these bus drivers, the London taxi drivers' exhaustive training allows them to navigate effortlessly to thousands of places within the city, demonstrating their powerful memory and attention. So constantly learning new routes in the city and reorganizing those routes creates a mental exercise that forces the cab driver's brains to transform and create new neuronal branches. And over time, these neuronal branches, they become more stronger, they get laid down as permanent memories, and this in turn changes the structure and size of the brains of these taxi drivers compared to the brains of the bus drivers. And it was shown by these researchers that numerous regions of the brains of these taxi drivers significantly were larger than those of the bus drivers across both cerebral hemispheres, once again demonstrating the capacity of the brain to sprout or to create new neuronal connections in response to complex learning. Now, the third tool to promote brain rewiring is visual spatial awareness. Visual spatial awareness simply means seeing, organizing, remembering, and differentiating objects of attention that are close vicinity. It's about recognizing symbols, images, words, pictures, and understanding how they differ from one another. It involves identifying, noting, and discriminating objects of different sizes, shapes, and colors. So note, visual spatial now requires attention and memory aspects as well. So there are various tools to promote visual spatial aspects of the brain. The next time you park your car at the shopping mall, observe the color, the make, and the model of the car that is parked on your left and the car that is parked on your right. Write down this information and tuck it away. Okay. And after completing your shopping and just before you return to your car, recall the specifics of those two cars and then review the notes to verify your answers. It's a great learning. In the same way, the next time you're in a traffic jam, instead of cursing the drivers in front of you or next to you, okay, try to look at the car that is in front of you, note down the license number, note down the color of the car, note down the make of the car. All right, you can do so similarly other cars as well. that you can see from where you're sitting, and then note down the specifics, and then try to retrieve that information. Try to play a game while you're waiting for your turn to move. All right, it's a great exercise for the brain. In the same way, you can ask your spouse or ask your friend to arrange a variety of kitchen items on a serving tray. Give yourself about a minute, 60 seconds or a minute to survey all the things that are on the tray. Okay, and now cover the tray with a cloth and then try to recall these items, all the items that you've seen. Note the time it takes for you to remember as much information as you can, and then repeat this test with a new set of items to practice again and then track your improvement. Okay, so it's a great way to enhance the visual spatial aspects of the brain. And then the fourth tool that becomes very important is brain flexibility. Brain flexibility is the ability of your brain to transition between multiple concepts simultaneously, as well as react and respond to new goals, new situations, or novel environmental stimuli. So the faster you can switch from one concept, from one goal, or from one stimulus to another, the greater is the mental flexibility. Now, many a times, our responses have become a habit. And so what happens is we are unable to transition between multiple concepts simultaneously. And those who cannot break this habitual thought patterns, or if they have a difficulty in transitioning smoothly between multiple concepts, they are said to be in a state of cognitive rigidity. Okay, and in Ayurveda or Vedic sciences, we call it manda buddhi. So it is very much essential that we develop this brain flexibility phenomenon. All right. So some of the tools that you can use to improve brain flexibility is hand switching. Think about the dominant hand that you use for almost all the tasks. All right. And now slowly start performing those same tasks with a non-dominant hand. For example, now I use my right hand for almost all the chores. So now what I've done is, of late, I've been starting to use my left hand for most of the tasks that I do. I'm able to eat very, very, very comfortably with my left hand. All right. But using the mouse with the left hand is a great difficulty even for me. All right. So this transition may feel very, very smooth. All right. But try it. It's a novel exercise it's a beautiful exercise for the brain. You can also check it out and see if you can develop proficiency using a non-dominant hand. All right. The other thing that you can think about is, some patterns. For example, now when you are climbing the doorstep or crossing the doorstep, or when you're coming down from your bed in the morning after you get up from the bed, which is the dominant leg that you use? Some of these tasks we use in an auto mode, and so we don't even realize. But what happens is generally you've been using the same leg for several years. Now be attentive, be more aware, and see if you can use the non-dominant leg to either cross the rooms, cross the bed, or any other obstacle. All right. So that's a great way of creating brain flexibility. In addition to that, you can also improve brain flexibility by playing a musical instrument with a non-dominant hand. Try it out. Or try putting on your clothes by using a non-dominant hand or leg first. Okay. And of course, eating with a non-dominant hand is another great task. Now, in addition to all these tools, there are other activities that can strengthen and promote new neuronal branches that result in mental resilience and brain strength. Now, these are standalone topics, and I'll talk about them in greater detail in the next few episodes. But it's sufficient to say that tasks like dancing, for example, dancing is associated with numerous benefits. Dancing requires the ability to recall all the dance steps and routines in a timely manner. In addition to doing the dance steps in a timely manner, it also involves continuous split-second changes in steps and complicated moves. Okay, all these are tasks for the brain. Okay, and so they promote neuronal branching. Reading and writing, I already mentioned this briefly. Reading and writing requires for you to pay attention to what you're reading. analyzing what you've read or analyzing what you've written, okay, and then trying to practically apply those concepts into your own daily task, into your own daily life. And this is a great learning for the brain. Okay, so reading and writing becomes very important tools for improving cognitive processing of construction, derivation, and decoding of words. Okay, and it stimulates the rewiring of neuronal connections. Sleep. Good quality sleep consolidates new memories. It promotes synaptic pruning. Pruning is where the brain removes all unwanted and unnecessary information for development and for reparation. It's a means of continually maintaining more efficient brain function. In addition, our brains are endowed with a waste carrying channel. And this waste carrying channel becomes very active only when we are sleeping. Okay, when we have good quality sleep. The waste clearance system has to operate optimally for the brain to remove any, to remain functionally active and resilient and to promote new neural connections. But this waste clearing system, okay, functions efficiently only when you have good quality sleep. So good quality sleep is required for the waste clearing system, and having a good waste clearing system will then help promote new neural connections. Selfless service, okay, karma yoga or seva, what we call in Vedic sciences. You may not understand the concept very well about what exactly happens when you do selfless service, but selfless service releases several feel-good hormones. Okay, and these feel-good hormones stimulate new neuronal branches. They stimulate new neuronal connections, and thereby they improve mental immunity, which in turn helps to improve longevity and overall health. In addition, fasting, and I already talked about that a month ago. Fasting is a great exercise to promote new neuronal connections. Now, remember, in my last talk, I talked about the importance of the 12 to 14 to 15 hours of fast between your last meal of the day and the morning breakfast. All right. So if you keep that gap of 12 to 15 hours, what happens is the brain switches from glucose metabolism to fat metabolism. And fat metabolism then tends to release several ketone bodies. And one of the ketone bodies is beta hydroxybutyrate acid. Okay. And together with another neurotrophic factor called brain derived neurotrophic factor, these compounds will support nerve growth. They support neural connections. Now, in addition, this 12 to 16 hours of fast will actually activate and promote the brain recycling system as well. All right, so fasting becomes very important as a tool to promote brain rewiring. Chewing your food, an extremely important aspect. This is a great example of the oral cavity brain nexus. So studies have shown that you should not be gulping your food. You should not be partially chewing your food. You should chew the food until the food becomes a soupy consistency before you swallow the food. All right. Several studies have pointed out the importance of chewing the food and the close association this has with the brain, with the mental health, and with cognition. Chewing, which is also called as mastication, involves the up and down and side to side movement of the jaw muscles. All right. And this assists in reducing the particles of solid food. When food enters the mouth, the jaw muscles position the food between the teeth for grinding and crushing. At this juncture, what happens is there are multiple neural circuits that connects the oral cavity jaw muscles to the brain tissue. And this exchange of information between the brain and oral cavity will help determine how much of force is required to break the food, how much of strength is required, how much of enzyme activity is required for the saliva to be released into the mouth. All of this then is required to confirm or to transform the food into a bolus. A bolus is nothing but a soupy consistency food. This bolus of food, which is actually a combination of your food and the saliva that you eat, has to then be swallowed. Okay, so each time you chew, you are actually, because of the nexus with the brain, you are strengthening or stimulating neural circuits. In addition, physical exercise is a great way to promote neural connection. Physical exercise promotes neural branching. It delays age-associated dementia or age-associated cognitive decline. Several studies have linked regular moderate to high intensity exercises to a slower decline in memory and thinking aspects. Physical exercise stimulates the production of specific neurochemicals that promote rewiring, that promote neuronal branching. So physical exercise could include dancing, walking, swimming, any kind of sports activities, yoga. All these are great examples of exercises that stimulate brain rewiring. In addition, if you are into art, crochet, knitting, sculpture, pottery, carpentry, these are great skill sets that also promote neuronal rewiring. The reason being that all these tasks require bilateral, coordinated, precise hand movements along with fine eye movements. Okay, so all four aspects of the brain, namely attention, memory, visual spatial, and flexibility, are activated when you are engaged in one of these tasks. These tasks promote focus, they promote attention, and because of their involvement with other limbs, they promote the connection with the brain, and thereby you have new neural connections. So these activities, remember, they are not very simple. These are hard exercises for the brain, and they are extremely wonderful set of tasks that promote neuronal rewiring. So to conclude, brain rewiring or neuroplasticity is the key to brain's resilience and strength. Brain fitness is just as important as physical health, and it is exactly what it sounds like, keeping the brain and mental health in a healthy state by performing a mentally stimulating task. Now, brain fitness, mental fitness, and mental exercise all mean the same thing. It's the act of performing any stimulating task that helps an individual to be more alert, to think more rationally, to think more logically, to make sound and correct decisions, and to boost a declining memory. Brain fitness can occur in a wide variety of ways, which I discussed in the previous slides, that helps to build and remodel our neuronal network connectivity for people of all ages. Incorporating brain exercises into one's life can help reap the benefits of a sharp mind and a healthy body for years to come. It's not necessary that you have to develop dementia to use these practices. Anybody can start these mental exercises or these brain strengthening exercises. And it's not surprising that in general, people who possess a high level of mental agility are also physically healthy and they have a better health span. So brain rewiring or sculpting the brain are critical in keeping you mentally sharp, mentally confident, and focused. And together with other good living practices, these will help in attaining a strong immunity at all levels of individuality, the body, the brain, the body, the mind, and the emotions. All right. So let me stop here and I'll take your questions. Thank you.